Welcome to another story made by Oracle One. The Pinecrest home for elders stood at the end of an old service road, surrounded by pine woods that swallowed the horizon. It had once been a sanatorium in the 1920s, its halls echoing with the sick and the dying. Time hadn't been kind to it. The exterior paint peeled like sunburned skin, the windows clouded by age, and the air carried that peculiar smell of disinfectant and damp wood, a smell that never left your clothes. Nurse Anna Leland arrived in early October. The wind carried the sharpness of winter, and the forest beyond the gates seemed to sway with more than the breeze. She had taken the job out of desperation. Her last hospital position had ended abruptly after she blew the whistle on a falsified patient record. This was supposed to be a quiet post, a place to recover her nerves and pay off debts. But from the first night, Pinecrest felt wrong. The matron, Mrs. Keller, was a gaunt woman in her 60s whose smile never reached her eyes. Her voice was brittle, efficient. "We serve 50 residents," she told Anna during orientation. "Your duties are simple. Keep to your ward, keep to your schedule, and above all, never be late for feeding hour." Anna frowned. "Feeding hour?" Mrs. Keller's expression didn't change. "Yes, dinner. But we call it feeding hour here. You'll understand soon enough." The first days passed in routine. Anna took vitals, changed linens, and handed out medication. The residents were a quiet bunch, docile to the point of eeriness. They stared at the walls, murmured to themselves, or dozed with eyes half open. Few spoke coherently. There was a sameness to them, a pale, waxy look, as if the blood had drained from their faces long ago. The staff wasn't much livelier. Most avoided eye contact, moving through their duties like ghosts. Anna tried to make conversation, but their answers were clipped, mechanical. When she asked about the food, they fell silent. Dinner always came at precisely 7. The cook, an old man named Jonah, brought covered carts from the kitchen. The aroma was rich, almost intoxicating, though she couldn't quite place it. It wasn't the usual institutional stew or overcooked chicken. It was meat, she thought, but what kind? Every evening, the residents shuffled into the dining hall, guided by the nurses. As soon as the plates were uncovered, they would fall upon their food with a hunger that disturbed her. No one spoke during feeding hour. Only the sound of chewing and wet swallowing filled the room. Their jaws worked rhythmically, their pale throats bobbing as they devoured every scrap. When they finished, Mrs. Keller would ring a small brass bell, and silence would descend again. On her 4th night, Anna noticed something odd. One of the residents, Mrs. Denning, didn't receive a plate. Jonah whispered to Mrs. Keller, who simply nodded. Then the rest of the residents began to eat. Minutes later, Mrs. Denning started shaking, her eyes rolling back. Foam gathered at her lips. Anna rushed to her side, but Mrs. Keller caught her arm. "Leave her," the matron said quietly. "She missed her ration. She'll be fed later." Anna hesitated. "She's having a seizure." "No," Mrs. Keller said, her grip tightening. "She's hungry." They carried Mrs. Denning away after the meal. When Anna asked where, no one would answer. The next morning, Mrs. Denning's bed was neatly made, her name removed from the roster. "Transferred to another facility," Mrs. Keller said flatly. Anna didn't believe her. That night she peeked into the kitchen. Jonah was alone, carving something on the counter. She could hear the scrape of metal on bone. "You shouldn't be here," he said without turning around. His knife never stopped moving. "Go back to your ward." "What are you cutting?" she asked. He didn't answer, but when she caught a glimpse of what lay on the counter, her stomach lurched. It wasn't a cut of pork or beef. It was a human hand, gray, veined, with a hospital wristband still attached. Jonah looked over his shoulder, his eyes like dull marbles. "We all have to eat," he murmured. Anna stumbled backward and fled before he could say more. She spent the next day in a haze of disbelief. She wanted to leave, but Pinecrest was miles from the nearest town, and her car had broken down the previous week. The phone lines were unreliable, and the only signal spot was by the forest's edge, too far to reach without permission. She told herself she must have imagined it. Stress, exhaustion, something logical. But then came feeding hour again. This time she watched closely. The meat served that night was darker than usual, almost blackened at the edges. The smell filled the air, metallic and sweet. The residents ate greedily, their faces slick with sweat. As they finished, a sound rose from their throats, a low humming, almost like a chant. It started faint, then grew until the walls vibrated. Mrs. Keller smiled faintly, closing her eyes as if in prayer. Anna backed away from the table. The humming stopped as suddenly as it began. Mrs. Keller rang her bell, and everyone returned to silence. Anna couldn't take it anymore. That night, she crept back into the kitchen. Jonah wasn't there. The counters were spotless, the floor washed. She opened the refrigerator. Inside were rows of covered trays labeled only with room numbers. She lifted one lid. Underneath was a neatly arranged selection of organs, heart, liver, kidneys, all unmistakably human. Her hand flew to her mouth. A shadow shifted behind her. "I warned you not to look." Jonah's voice was tired, almost regretful. He stood in the doorway, holding his carving knife loosely at his side. "You shouldn't have come back here." "What is this?" she whispered. "Where do you get that?" "They give themselves," he said. "Eventually they all do. It's the agreement." "Agreement?" "Pinecrest keeps them alive long past their time. In return, they feed the others. When their bodies fail, their flesh becomes nourishment for the rest. It's the cycle that keeps this place running." "That's insane," Anna said, stepping back. Jonah sighed. "You think death is cleaner anywhere else? Out there, they rot alone. Here, they serve a purpose." He gestured toward the freezer. "You'd be surprised how long they last once they start eating it." She ran. The halls were dim, the emergency lights casting everything in shades of red. Her footsteps echoed unnaturally loud. She turned a corner and nearly collided with Mrs. Keller. The matron's eyes glittered in the half-light. "You saw the kitchen," she said simply. "Then you understand." "Understand what?" "You're feeding people human flesh." "Feeding?" Mrs. Keller smiled thinly. "No, child. We're preserving them. The body is weak, but the flesh holds memory, vitality. When they eat, they take in what remains of those who've gone before. That's why they live so long. Some of them are over 100, still walking." Anna shook her head. "You're sick." "Sick?" Mrs. Keller's voice softened. "You'll see soon enough. The food binds them to this place. It binds all of us." She reached out, and Anna saw the veins running up her arm, pulsing faintly under her skin, as if something inside them moved. Anna pushed past her and bolted toward the entrance, but the heavy front doors were chained shut. The other nurses were standing in the foyer, motionless, their faces slack. Their eyes followed her, but they didn't move to stop her. They just stared. "You can't leave during feeding hour," Mrs. Keller said from behind. "The forest doesn't allow it." Anna turned. "What are you talking about?" "This place was built on old ground," Mrs. Keller whispered. "Before it was a sanatorium, it was a hunting lodge. The men who built it made offerings to what lived in those woods. Flesh for safety. Blood for longevity. The lodge burned, but the offering remained. Now Pinecrest carries the tradition." Anna felt the walls close in. "You're all mad." She ran again, down the corridor toward the west wing, where the unused rooms lay. The lights flickered, buzzing overhead. She ducked into an empty room, slammed the door, and pressed her back against it. Her pulse pounded. From the hallway came faint dragging sounds, like many feet shuffling in unison. She peered through the small window in the door. The residents were out of their rooms, moving together, their heads lolling. Their mouths hung open, slick with blood. They were chanting softly, a sound that made her stomach twist. The words were old, guttural, something that didn't belong in any human throat. Their eyes glowed faintly in the dim light. Feeding hour wasn't over. She crawled toward the corner and pulled her phone from her pocket. No signal. She tried the flashlight, but it flickered weakly, then died. Something scratched against the other side of the door. Slowly, a hand pressed against the glass. The skin was pale and translucent, veins dark beneath the surface. Then another hand joined it. And another, until the window was covered. A face appeared, Mrs. Denning. Her mouth was open too wide, her teeth blackened, her tongue shriveled. "Hungry," she croaked. The door handle began to turn. Anna grabbed the nearest object, a metal tray, and backed into the far corner. The door creaked open. The smell hit her first, copper, decay, and something sweet. The residents shuffled in, their movements jerky and unnatural. Mrs. Keller stood among them, her face serene. "You can't run from it," she said. "You've breathed it in. The air here carries it. It's in your blood now." Anna shook her head. "Stay away from me. Join us, Anna. You'll never grow old. Never hunger again." The crowd closed in. Anna swung the tray wildly, catching one in the face. Flesh tore like paper. The thing didn't bleed. Instead, a dark fluid seeped out, thick and slow. The smell burned her throat. She pushed past them, slipping on the viscous substance, and ran down the hall toward the basement stairs. The air grew colder with each step. She could hear whispering, voices overlapping, coming from the walls themselves. The basement was vast and low-ceilinged, lined with meat hooks and industrial freezers. She stumbled toward the back, searching for a window, an exit, anything. Then she saw the feeding pit. It was circular, built into the floor, covered by a metal grate. Beneath it, something moved. The air above it shimmered with heat, even though the room was freezing. The whispers grew louder. A shape pulsed below the grate, huge and wet, as if the ground itself were breathing. She felt it in her bones, an ancient hunger. This was the source, the thing they fed. She turned to run, but Jonah was there, blocking the stairs. His eyes were black now, his voice a wet gurgle. "You shouldn't have come here." "I'm leaving," she said. "You can't leave." He stepped closer. "It needs new caretakers. We grow tired. It chose you." "I won't. You already have." He reached for her. She swung a wrench she'd found on the floor, striking his arm. It snapped like brittle wood, but he didn't react. His other hand caught her throat. "You'll see," he rasped. "When the hunger comes, you'll see." She kicked him hard, breaking free, and scrambled up the stairs. The walls around her pulsed as if alive. She could hear the chanting above now, rhythmic and slow. The feeding hour was ending. She burst into the main hall, gasping for breath. The residents stood in rows, motionless. Mrs. Keller stood before them, holding a bowl filled with dark liquid. "The cycle continues," she intoned. "The flesh remembers." She lifted the bowl and drank deeply. The residents followed suit, each dipping their fingers into bowls she had placed before them, smearing the substance across their tongues. The room filled with that terrible humming again. The walls seemed to breathe. Anna ran to the door and yanked at the chains. They came loose easily, too easily, as if they had never been meant to hold. She threw the doors open and staggered into the night. The forest loomed ahead, endless and black. She ran until her lungs burned, until Pinecrest was just a faint glow behind her. She collapsed among the pines, gasping. For a moment, the silence felt real. But then she heard it, a low hum, rising from the trees. The same chant, carried by the wind. She looked back. The building's windows glowed faintly, each one pulsing like an eye. Then she felt it, the hunger. It started as a hollow ache in her stomach, then spread upward, twisting through her veins. She pressed her hands to her belly, shuddering. The scent of the woods, earth, moss, decay, suddenly made her mouth water. She realized what Jonah meant. It was inside her now. The gift, the curse, the hunger that never ends. Somewhere far behind, the dinner bell rang again. For more stories, like and subscribe.